I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
And we are two nerds who are here to make Shakespeare easier to understand.
In this podcast, we will explore as many dimensions to Shakespeare's plays as we can by looking at the text, examining the historical context in which the plays were written, and how his plays are viewed through modern lenses of feminism, racism, classism, colonialism, nationalism, ableism, all of the isms.
We will discuss how his plays shaped both the past and present, and, as theater makers, how his plays can be responsibly performed today, all while trying our best to approach his works without giving in to bardolatry.
So, Shakespeare Anyone?
Hi, listeners. Want to support Shakespeare Anyone? Visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. Now, onto the episode.
Hi, Kourtney.
Hi, Elyse. Happy 2025.
Happy 2025 and year 5 of Shakespeare Anyone.
Ooh, we didn't even plan that when we started podcasting.
We didn't. And to kick off year 5, we're starting with, drumroll please. Kicking off year 5 with Henry V.
Also, we didn't do that intentionally either.
No. Again, if you listen to our revisiting, we pick shows purely based on vibes here at Shakespeare Anyone. So,
yeah.
We were talking about which play to do next, and we said, well, we were talking about how we're running out of comedies.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yes.
And at least once a year when we talk about what play we want to do next, we kind of have talked about, like, how do we want to do the histories? And for a long time, we were like, oh, maybe we should do them in, like, chronological order of, like, the events of English history. And you know what, listeners? We obviously decided to not do that. And for listeners, the reason why we decided to do that is, one, it was stopping us from doing histories because we were like, that's a big commitment. And that sounds really cool. But I've spent the past 2-3 years working a little bit more on Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and Henry V, and also exploring some of the other histories. And when we came together to talk about it, I said, he didn't write them in chronological order. And to me, that means we don't have to explore them in chronological order. And they are all sort of written as standalone plays because they also wouldn't have been performed in a marathon, Hollow Crown, War of the Roses style. So,
no. But we don't need to be so rigid about the histories.
No.
Especially because some are more popular than others, some are more produced than others, some are more widely studied than others. And so rather than having these parameters based on chronology, we should do it based on our vibes, what we're vibing with.
How we choose every other play.
Yes, and Elyse, while you have spent 2 to 3 years exploring this play, working with this play, I have a very limited capacity with this play. So I have read the play once, and I saw it at the Globe in London in 2012. And this particular production starred Jamie Parker as Henry V. And those are my 2 connections to Henry V. So I'm really looking forward to exploring this and getting to know this play so much better, especially because when I was in school, both high school and undergrad, the histories terrified me. They just seemed bigger and scarier. And so we are here to make them big, but not
less scary.
Yeah. And much more accessible.
Yes.
Yes. And a quick reminder, listeners, old and new, the synopsis is going to be a play-by-play with the acts, the scenes, what is happening piece by piece so that you understand the action of the play. And we will get to those nittier, grittier analyses of language and the historical context once we have concluded the synopsis. This is strictly for all of us to understand what is happening in the play.
Yes, and then we will do our Stuff to Chew On episode, which will go over at a very high level some topics related to the play, and then we'll get into our deep dives later. That's how we do things here at Shakespeare Anyone.
Mm-hmm.
We are now going to take the big jump into our first history.
The play begins with the chorus reciting the prologue. In the prologue, the chorus tells us that the audience is going to watch a play about the heroic Prince Harry and the Battle of Agincourt. The chorus questions whether or not the confines of the theater space will be able to adequately tell the story, but asks the audience to let their imaginations see the two monarchs, the massive army, and the horses on the battlefield. Many years of history will be represented in a short period of time, and the chorus will be the audience's commentator. The chorus exits.
The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Bishop of Ely enter. Canterbury tells Ely that a bill that moved in Parliament but was postponed during King Henry IV's tumultuous reign is now moved in Parliament. Canterbury and Ely do not want this bill to pass because it threatens church revenues, meaning that they will each lose half of their possessions. So, they need to figure out how to stop it from passing.
They then discuss the new king, King Henry V. We learn that King Henry is held in high regard and loves the Holy Church. Canterbury then explains that, when he was younger, the king's behavior did not promise a good ruler. However, when his father, Henry IV, died, so too did Henry V's wildness. Canterbury describes it as a reformation, and Ely recalls they are blessed by the change. The king is excellent in all manners of reason, debate, discourse of war, and policy that you wouldn't believe he used to keep company in such low places.
Ely circles us back to the matter of this bill in Parliament. He asks Canterbury if King Henry is for or against the bill. Canterbury says that the king seems impartial, or leaning more towards them than the people who made the bill. Canterbury also shares that he offered a generous financial contribution to support the king's invasion of France as a tactic to postpone the bill. Canterbury thinks that the king would have accepted the financial support to his claim to the French throne, but he didn't get to find out because a meeting with the French ambassador cut off his meeting.
Canterbury and Ely should now go in to speak with the king to learn the contents of the French embassy's message, although Canterbury thinks he already knows what it's about. They exit.
King Henry, his brothers, the Duke of Gloucester, Duke of Bedford, and Duke of Clarence, his uncle, the Duke of Exeter, and the Earls of Warwick and Westmoreland enter with attendants. The king asks an attendant to call for Canterbury. The attendant exits. Westmoreland then asks the king if they should call in the French ambassador. King Henry says, not yet. He says that they first need to internally resolve some important matters concerning England and France. Canterbury and Ely enter. King Henry asks Canterbury to explain exactly why the French law does or does not stop England in Henry's claim to the French throne. He warns that Canterbury should explain this without using falsely invented claims for Henry. This is important because, as Henry explains, going to war with France will cause many good people to die.
Canterbury assures everyone that there is nothing stopping Henry's claim to the French throne. French law cites Pharamond, the legendary ancestor of the Frankish kings, in their law that, quote, no woman shall secede in French land, unquote. Canterbury goes on to explain that France's history of invading and settling in other lands, such as Germany, is the cause of the law barring female rulers in France. French settlers subdued German women and then created the law. Canterbury brings us up to point out that this French law was not intended for France, but was written hundreds of years after Pharamond for those parts that were invaded and settled. Due to this, Henry does actually have a claim to the French throne through the female line of his ancestry back to his great-grandfather, Edward III.
Ely encourages King Henry to evoke the valiant dead from his great-grandfather's reign and use his powerful army to revive their deeds. He reinforces that Henry is France's heir and should be on the throne. The blood and courage that made his ancestors great runs in his blood, and Henry is young and ripe for this sort of exploit. Exeter and Westmoreland agree. Westmoreland adds that King Henry has loyal subjects who would leave England to serve in the army against France. With all of this, Canterbury repeats his offer to fund the war.
King Henry adds that they must not only have an army to invade France, Part of that army needs to remain in England to defend against a Scottish invasion of England while in France. Canterbury ensures that there will be defense along the border, but Henry anticipates that Scotland will fiercely invade, much like they did to a defenseless England in Edward III's time. Canterbury reminds King Henry that England was more afraid than actually harmed when that happened. What they should do is learn from that experience. While Edward III and his nobles were away in France, England was still able to send the King of Scots to France as a political prisoner and gain praise for England. Canterbury suggests dividing up their forces so that some go to France with King Henry, while others remain in England as defense against Scotland.
King Henry calls in the French ambassador. Before the ambassador enters, King Henry agrees that England will go to war against France and either take it back or break it. The ambassador enters with a message from the Dauphin, not the King of France. The Dauphin's message is that King Henry cannot take parts of France and he should stop talking about his alleged claim to the French throne. The Dauphin sends a barrel of tennis balls as a token of his refusal.
King Henry thanks the Dauphin for the gift and the ambassador for their time. King Henry then goes on to explain through a reference to the game of tennis that he will play a match in France that will win him the French king's crown, and to tell this to the Dauphin. King Henry goes on to admit that he neglected the court and didn't recognize the value of the English throne. But now he will be the King of England and be raised up in his French throne. The Dauphin's mockery of England has turned the tennis balls into cannonballs. Lastly, King Henry tells the ambassador to tell the Dauphin thousands more will weep because of what's to come, war, than will have laughed at the Dauphin's joke. The ambassador exits. King Henry commands everyone to prepare for war with France. All exit.
The chorus re-enters and says that the young people of England are now impassioned for war. These Englishmen are all in preparation to follow King Henry into battle. The French, having heard of this preparation, are afraid and are trying to turn England away from its goal. The chorus praises England for its greatness despite its small size. But, in spite of this greatness, France has found one fault. 3 English traitors who are being paid by France to conspire against England. These 3 traitors are Richard, Earl of Cambridge, Henry, Lord Scroop of Masham, and Sir Thomas Grey, Knight of Northumberland. The chorus asks the audience to keep watching the play they are putting on. Up to now, the traitors have agreed to the deal and have been paid, and King Henry is off to France. The play's setting is moving to Southampton. We'll then go to France, and then back to Southampton. For now, we're in Southampton. They exit.
Corporal Nym and Lieutenant Bardolph enter and meet each other. Bardolph asks Nym if Ensign Pistol and his friends are here yet. Nym responds that he doesn't care if they are. We learn that Nym is in a fight with Pistol, but Bardolph wishes they would make up and be friends for when all 3 of them go off and fight in France together. Nym rejects Bardolph's proposal. Bardolph guesses that Nym is upset that Pistol is married to Nell Quickly, and that Nell Quickly did Nym wrong because they were previously engaged to be married. Nym says that he can't tell exactly what is going on, but he says that he will get his revenge. To what conclusion, time will tell.
Pistol and Nell Quickly enter. Bardolph greets them while Nym insults Pistol by insinuating that Pistol is dependent on his wife's tavern business financially because he can't support them on his own. Pistol rebukes this, especially because, he says, Nell Quickly doesn't keep lodgers. Nell Quickly agrees because, at this rate, people will think they run a bawdy house.
Nym then draws his sword on Pistol, and Pistol draws his own sword back. Bardolph tries to break up the fight, but both Nym and Pistol are ready to fight. Nell Quickly implores Nym to have valor. Nym and Pistol both sheathe their swords. In spite of this, the 2, Nym and Pistol, begin another round of verbal sparring, and they draw their swords again. Bardolph draws his sword on Nym and Pistol and threatens them unless they put their swords away. Pistol believes Bardolph's threat, and all 3 men, Nym, Pistol, and Bardolph, sheathe their swords. Nym and Pistol continue to insult each other. Nym then threatens to kill Pistol, to which Pistol asks if Nym thinks that killing him, Pistol, is the way for Nym to get to his wife, Nell Quickly. Instead, Pistol says, Nym shall marry the prostitute doll Tearsheet, for Nell Quickly shall be his, Pistol's, unequaled woman.
A boy enters and asks Pistol and Nell Quickly to come see his sickly servant. Nell Quickly mentions that this man is so sick he will likely die soon. King Henry killed his heart. Nell Quickly and the boy exit.
Bardolph makes another plea to Nym and Pistol that the two of them should make up before the three of them go to France together. Pistol disagrees. Nym then asks Pistol to pay him the money that he owes from betting. Pistol says that he won't pay Nym. Nym and Pistol draw their swords again. Bardolph draws his sword again and threatens them again. This causes Pistol to sheath his sword again. Bardolph tells Nym that if he can be friends with Pistol, he should, but if Nym must be enemies with Pistol, Nym will also be enemies with Bardolph. Bardolph demands Nym put up his sword. Nym asks for his money. Pistol tells Nym that he will pay Nym back whatever amount he has on him. The difference will be made up in liquor, and friendship and brotherhood will unite Nym and Pistol. Nym agrees to this. Nym and Bardolph sheathe their swords. Nym and Pistol shake hands on the agreement.
Nell Quickly enters. She asks that they come in to see Sir John Falstaff. Falstaff has an illness that is incredibly pitiful to see. Nym blames King Henry for Falstaff's illness. Pistol agrees. Nym reinforces that King Henry is a good king who is on a course that no one will turn him from. Pistol says that they should all go express their sympathy with Falstaff. All exit.
Exeter, Bedford, and Westmoreland enter. We learn that there are 3 traitors to England who King Henry had trusted, but Henry has learned have betrayed him. The traitors are going to be arrested because they sold out King Henry's life for payment from France.
Trumpets sound. King Henry, Scroop, Cambridge, Grey, lords and attendants enter. King Henry asks Cambridge, Scroop, and Grey for their thoughts on a military plan England has planned into France. Scroop thinks it will succeed so long as every man does his best. King Henry says that won't be a problem, since everyone going to France is loyal to Henry's mission. Cambridge responds that never was a monarch so feared and loved as King Henry. Grey adds that even King Henry's father's enemies are loyal to King Henry. King Henry says this is a great cause for thankfulness, and those things will be forgotten in proportion to their service to King Henry. Scroop agrees that men will do great services for rewards, which King Henry doesn't judge.
King Henry then asks Exeter to set free the man who was arrested yesterday for ranting against Henry. King Henry thinks he was just having too much wine that set him off, and now that he's leveled out and sobered up, he should be pardoned. Scroop doesn't agree with this mercy and says that the man should be punished and made an example for others. Cambridge and Grey agree with Scroop. King Henry states that these 3 show too much love and care for King Henry against this poor man. King Henry wonders, if little mistakes shouldn't be ignored, how should they act when capital crimes happen? King Henry concludes that he will free that man, even though Cambridge, Scroop, and Grey want him to be punished.
Now, King Henry redirects the conversation back to the affairs of France. King Henry asks, who are the most recent commissioners, or persons entrusted with an office by the king? Cambridge says he was made one today, as were Scroop and Grey. King Henry gives each of them their papers and tells them that he, King Henry, knows their worthiness. These papers cause Cambridge, Scroop, and Grey to fall to their knees, confess, and beg for mercy. King Henry recalls that none of them counseled for mercy earlier, so they must not talk of mercy now.
King Henry then turns the scene into a spectacle for the English princes and nobles. King Henry reveals the traitors' conspiracy against England. Cambridge was paid to kill King Henry in Hampton. Grey also swore to this act. The betrayal from Scroop, however, is especially upsetting for King Henry, seeing as Scroop was Henry's close counselor. It's hard for King Henry to believe that Scroop would use the king for his own profit, and for a foreign hire. King Henry tries to reason why Scroop would join this treason. The betrayal is like another fall of a man. King Henry demands they all be arrested to answer the law and be released of their treacheries.
Cambridge, Scroop, and Grey rise. Exeter announces that he arrests Richard, Earl of Cambridge, Henry, Lord Scroop of Masham, and Thomas Grey, Knight of Northumberland, of high treason. Scroop, being uncovered, repents his mistake, that he wishes King Henry forgives, even if he must pay the corporeal price. Cambridge admits that the gold was the inciting cause, but he is so thankful that the plot was prevented. He wishes both God and King Henry pardon him. Grey adds that he rejoices that the treason plot was uncovered and hopes his mistake is pardoned. King Henry announces that God has acquitted the three of them. But, due to the severity of the treason, England sentences them to death. Cambridge, Scroop, and Grey exit guarded.
King Henry announces it is time to go to France. This shall be equally glorious for everyone. There is no doubt it will be a fair and lucky war for England, since God uncovered this treason that would have hindered their expedition. Now it's time to go, since the signs of war are advancing. King Henry declares he will win France or die trying. There's a flourish, and all exit.
Pistol, Nym, Bardolph, the boy, and Nell Quickly enter. Nell Quickly offers Pistol that she will go with him to Staines, a town 17 miles west of London. Pistol declines the offer because he needs to grieve. Pistol advises Bardolph, Nym, and the boy that, while they may grieve inwardly over Falstaff's death, they should pull themselves together and put on a cheerful face. Nell quickly recounts Falstaff's death the previous night, and the group mourns. After the liquor is out, it is time to leave Southampton for France. Pistol says goodbye to Nell quickly and advises her how to take care of his affairs. Bardolph and Nym also say goodbye to Nell quickly. All exit.
There is a flourish. The French king, the Dauphin, the Constable, and the Dukes of Berry and Breton enter. The French king announces that England is coming to overpower France, and so it is vitally important that France puts up first-class defense. Due to this, the Dukes of Berry, Breton, Brabant, and Orléans shall go forward, and the Dauphin shall quickly send off reinforcements of men with means of defense because of England's hostile advance. France should err on the side of caution and not underestimate the English on the battlefield.
The Dauphin agrees with his father that France should arm itself against England and prepare as though a war is expected. Therefore, the Dauphin suggests that they go observe the weaker parts of France, but without revealing England's current level of threat. In fact, the Dauphin says, England is so vainly ruled that there's no reason for France to fear England.
The Constable retorts that the Dauphin mistakes King Henry's capabilities. King Henry is now very stately, and his vanities were former frivolities from his youth. Though the Dauphin does not agree with the Constable, he agrees that it would be amiss to not think the enemy is mightier than he seems. In this way, the forces necessary for defense are fully made up. The French king agrees that they should think King Henry is strong, and the princes of France should arm their defenses in order to meet that expectation. Additionally, King Henry is descended from King Edward, Black Prince of Wales, who captured France's princes at the Battle of Crécy. Due to King Henry's victorious bloodline, the French king thinks France should fear him.
A messenger enters and delivers a message that ambassadors from King Henry would like to speak with the French king. The French king commands the messenger to bring in the ambassadors. The messenger exits. The Dauphin advises the French king to show a bold opposing front to England. Exeter enters with attendants. Exeter sends greetings from King Henry and delivers a message from King Henry asking the French king to dispossess himself from the crown of France. King Henry also sends a piece of paper detailing Henry's claim to the throne, noting his famous ancestor Edward III. King Henry bids the French king resign his wrongful crown and kingdom and give it to the rightful king, King Henry.
The French king asks what will follow if he doesn't give up the crown. Exeter says war. Exeter bids the French king take mercy on all the French who will die in war if the French king doesn't comply. This is King Henry's claim and a threat. The French king responds that France will report their intent tomorrow. The Dauphin asks Exeter what message King Henry brings to him. Exeter responds that King Henry gives scorn for the mockery of the Dauphin's tennis ball message and that the Dauphin will answer for that. The Dauphin responds that if his father, the king, replies in fair to England, it is certainly against his will because the Dauphin wants nothing but conflict. Exeter retorts that Dauphin will lose if King Henry stays in France for war. The French king wraps up this conversation by restating that England will know France's intent tomorrow.
There is a flourish. King Henry has arrived in France. The French king allows the English to leave with fair conditions. The night is but a small pause before there needs to be answers to matters of this import. All exit.
The chorus re-enters and says that the play is now moving as quickly as thought. The chorus asks the audience to imagine they have seen King Henry and his naval fleet embark from Hampton, travel across the sea, and arrive on the shores of France at Harfleur, a port at the mouth of the Seine. The audience is invited to allow their minds to leave England behind because all of the exciting parts of the story are now happening in France.
The chorus urges the audience to imagine they have seen King Henry and his troops lay siege to Harfleur, and as King Henry's cannons were pointed at the walls of the city, the audience saw a scene where the English ambassador to France comes back from meeting with the King of France and tells King Henry that the King of France has offered Catherine, daughter of the King of France, in marriage and a dowry of some small and unprofitable dukedoms to Henry in an attempt to stop Henry's invasion. However, Henry was not pleased by the offer and ordered the cannons to fire on Harfleur. There are sounds of military alarms, like drums or trumpets sounding, and cannons firing. The chorus once more prompts the audience to be kind and continue to use their imaginations to complete the performance of the actors.
Now, back in the action of the play, the military alarms sound again as soldiers scale the walls of Harfleur. Henry delivers a rousing speech to his troops, urging them to go once more into the breach of the walls of Harfleur, or to mend the hole in the walls with the bodies of English soldiers. He tells them to be brave and fierce in the face of war, as it is as becoming for a man to be so in wartime as it is appropriate for men to be modest and humble in peacetime. He reminds the nobles among the troops to be as fierce as their forefathers who fought in past wars, to not dishonor their mothers, and show their French foes how much better the English are at war. He then addresses the rest of the soldiers, aka the ones who aren't English nobility, and commands them to show him the quality of their parentage through battle. Henry says he can see that the soldiers are ready and commands them to charge into battle and yell, "God for Harry, England and St. George," as they do. Drums, trumpets, and cannons sound again.
As the noise of the battle subsides, Nym, Bardolph, Pistol, and Boy enter, presumably onto an empty stage as they trail behind the rest of the troops. Bardolph urges the group to go onwards towards the breach, but Nym protests as the battle is still going on. Pistol agrees that there is still too much happening around them, and Boy wishes that they were all back home in London at an alehouse. Pistol and Boy recite some poetry, or perhaps sing, about war, just as Fluellen, a Welsh captain in the king's army, enters. Fluellen orders the group to go to the breach and beats Bardolph, Pistol, and Nym. Pistol and Nym beg for mercy as the majority of the group exits towards the battle.
Boy is left alone on stage and speaks directly to the audience about the 3 men he has been serving. He describes each man. Bardolph is choleric but cowardly. He will threaten to fight someone but not actually go through with it. Pistol's bark is worse than his bite. He will fight with words but not weapons. And while Nym says the least out of the 3, he is a drunken idiot who tries to appear to be wiser and better than he is. Boy tells the audience that all 3 men are thieves and want Boy to become a thief too. Therefore, Boy has decided to leave the service of these 3 and seek to serve someone better, as he literally cannot stomach Bardolph, Pistol, and Nym's villainy.
The Boy exits as Gower, another captain in the army, enters to meet with Fluellen, who re-enters. Gower tells Fluellen that Fluellen must come with him to the mines to meet with the Duke of Gloucester. Gloucester's troops have been digging mines, or tunnels, to breach the walls of Harfleur by going under them. Fluellen excitedly tells Gower that Gower should go back to the Duke of Gloucester and tell him that they all should not go to the mines because the enemy troops are digging under Gloucester's tunnels and might blow them up.
Gower reminds Fluellen that the Duke of Gloucester is in charge of the siege and is receiving directions and strategy from an Irishman who is very valiant. Fluellen asks if the Irishman is Captain McMorris, and Gower says he thinks he is. Fluellen calls McMorris an ass and says that McMorris has no more knowledge of war strategy and military history than a puppy dog has. Just then, McMorris enters with Jamie, a Scottish captain. As they approach, Fluellen notes that Captain Jamie is incredibly valorous, quick in action and wit, and knows a lot about military history.
As a quick note here, Fluellen, McMorris, and Jamie are all written as speaking in the accents of their regions, and their depiction draws on early modern stereotypes of people from these regions for comic effect, but these aspects of their characters can't be easily captured in a plot synopsis.
Jamie and Fluellen greet each other, and Gower asks McMorris if McMorris has stopped the digging of the mines and if the troops digging have given up. McMorris laments that they were 1 hour away from finishing digging and blowing up the town when the trumpet sounded the retreat. Fluellen asks McMorris if he can have a friendly chat with McMorris about military theory and strategy, and Jamie says he would like to hear this conversation, if they would let him. McMorris says that there is no time to sit and talk, as they are already late to the siege and the breach. McMorris says it would be shameful to not move onward towards the battle. There is lots still to do. Jamie replies that he will fight valiantly before he dies, but he would have liked to hear the conversation between McMorris and Fluellen.
Fluellen then notes to McMorris that Fluellen thinks that there aren't many other men of McMorris's nation serving in the king's army. McMorris bombastically cuts Fluellen off mid-thought and asks if Fluellen is speaking ill of Irishmen and thinks poorly of McMorris because McMorris is Irish. Fluellen says McMorris misunderstands and must be intentionally doing so out of disrespect for Fluellen. McMorris says he does not know Fluellen and will cut off Fluellen's head. Gower interrupts and tells both that they are misunderstanding each other, and Jamie agrees. Just then, a parley is sounded from the town of Harfleur. Fluellen gets the last word in, saying to McMorris that when there is a better time, he will tell McMorris all he knows about military strategy. All exit.
King Henry enters with his train at the gates of Harfleur for the parley, and presumably the governor and citizens of Harfleur are in earshot or just off stage. Henry asks what the governor of Harfleur has decided, as this is the final parley Henry will grant. Therefore, Harfleur should surrender, and England will be merciful, or if Harfleur does not surrender, then they have chosen their own destruction. King Henry swears on his capacity as a soldier, a title which he thinks becomes him best, that if Harfleur does not surrender, the English forces will begin bombarding the town again and will not cease until Harfleur is buried in its own ashes. Furthermore, if Harfleur does not surrender now and accept the current terms of the parley, England will show no mercy to Harfleur's innocent women and children. And it will be the governor's fault when the town is sacked, raped, and pillaged, as Henry will not be able to control the horrors of war.
Henry then implores the men of Harfleur who are listening to his speech to take pity on their town and people while the English soldiers are under the king's command, and the king's grace is holding the bloodlust of war at bay. Or else, Henry says, the men will quickly witness a whole bunch of war crimes against their daughters, fathers, infants, mothers, and wives. Henry asks the governor and the men of the town again for their decision. Will they yield or be destroyed?
The governor responds that whatever hope they had of further defense has ended. They had asked the Dauphin for help, but have received a reply that the Dauphin is not ready to fight against such a large army. Therefore, the governor and the town yield to King Henry and his mercy. The governor invites Henry to enter the gates of Harfleur and do with Harfleur what Henry will, as Harfleur can no longer defend itself. King Henry commands the governor to open the gates, and the governor exits.
Henry turns to his uncle Exeter and instructs Exeter to enter Harfleur, stay there, and fortify the town against the French, thus installing Exeter as the new governor of Harfleur. Henry tells Exeter to be merciful, then shares that because winter is coming soon and soldiers are starting to get sick, Henry and his troops will continue towards Calais after spending the night in Harfleur. There is a flourish of trumpets, and everyone on stage exits towards the entrance of Harfleur.
Next, we move away from the action of war to the court of France and meet Catherine for the first time. Remember, Catherine is the daughter of the King of France, who has been offered to Henry in marriage. She enters with Alice, an old gentlewoman. This scene is performed mostly in French. Catherine asks Alice to tutor her in English, as Alice has spent some time in England, and Catherine needs to learn English. Alice says that she isn't fluent in English, but she agrees to help Catherine. Catherine asks Alice for the English names of various body parts, then repeats the English word in heavily accented English. Throughout the scene, Catherine comments on how quickly she is learning English, and Alice compliments Catherine's pronunciation of words. For Shakespeare's English early modern audience, there may have been some jokes here at the expense of the French. With the English words foot and gown, Catherine comments on how they sound like French curse words. After a few rounds of repetition, Catherine decides that the English lessons are over for now, and the two women exit to go to dinner.
Elsewhere in the French court, the King of France, the Dauphin, the Duke of Bretagne, the Constable, and other members of the French court enter in the middle of a discussion of King Henry's movements towards Calais. The French king says that it is certain that Henry and his troops have passed the river Somme, so some time has passed between now and the siege of Harfleur, as the Somme is a little over halfway between Harfleur and Calais.
The Constable, the Dauphin, and the Duke of Bretagne describe how the French have fiercely fought against the English forces. However, the progress of the English campaign has been a march of repeated conquering victories, not because of any tactical retreat by the French. The Constable wonders aloud where the English get their stamina, as the English are fighting with such heat that they make the French look cold in temperament. The Constable then urges the French to continue to fight for their country's honor. The Dauphin and the Duke of Bretagne say that French women are now mocking the French soldiers for losing so many battles and retreating from the English.
The French king then orders Mountjoy, the messenger, to tell King Henry that the French still do not surrender. The French king orders the French princes, including the Constable, the Dauphin, and the Duke of Bretagne, to go to the battlefield and to shake off their shame. The French king continues that the noblemen of France should create a barrier against Henry and his troops, descend on the battlefield like an avalanche, and bring Henry back as a captive prisoner to the French court at Rouen. The Constable agrees with this plan and says that he is only sorry that the English troops are so tired and hungry because it will make the fighting easy for France. King Henry might even surrender at the sight of the French army.
The French king orders the Constable to go quickly to Mountjoy to tell Mountjoy to also ask King Henry if England will willingly surrender now. Then the French king tells the Dauphin to stay with the king at court. The Dauphin protests, and the French king tells the Dauphin to be patient and stay at court, then orders the rest of the princes and noblemen to leave, go fight England, and quickly come back with news of England's defeat. All exit.
It's time to check back in with the English troops, and Gower and Fluellen enter separately to meet. Gower asks Fluellen if Fluellen has just come from securing a bridge that the English troops must cross in their march through France. Fluellen confirms that the bridge is secured for the English through some excellent military maneuvers, aka they got there before the French troops could damage the bridge, so the English will be able to easily cross the river. Gower asks Fluellen if the Duke of Exeter is safe. Fluellen professes how much he admires Exeter, how glad he is that Exeter hasn't been injured, and confirms that Exeter is now in charge of keeping the bridge secure.
Fluellen also reveals that there is an ancient lieutenant in Exeter's company who is very valiant, even though he is of a lower class. Note, ancient in this sense does not mean old. In Shakespeare's time, an ancient was an army officer below the level of lieutenant who was responsible for carrying the colors of the regiment, and the word is a corruption of the word ensign. Gower asks what this person's name is, and Fluellen reveals it is Pistol. This is possibly a comedic surprise to the audience, because the last time we saw Pistol, no one would have described him as valiant.
Pistol enters and asks Fluellen for a favor, for Fluellen to ask Exeter to pardon Bardolph, because Exeter has ordered Bardolph to be hanged for stealing a ceremonial box of communion wafers. Fluellen says that he would want the Duke to use discipline against Bardolph, even if Bardolph was Fluellen's brother. Pistol curses Fluellen and flips Fluellen off as Pistol exits.
Gower realizes that he remembers Pistol as a notorious thief. Fluellen responds that he saw Pistol be incredibly brave and valiant at the bridge, and Fluellen isn't bothered by being cursed at or flipped off by Pistol. Gower vents that Pistol is just the kind of rogue who goes to war just to be able to come back to London as a soldier and will memorize details of battles to be able to brag of service they didn't do. Gower cautions that Fluellen must learn to recognize the type of man who brings disgrace, or else Fluellen might be tricked by such a person. Fluellen tells Gower that Fluellen knows Pistol is not the man Pistol pretends to be, and if Fluellen can find an opportunity to expose Pistol, he will.
A drum sounds offstage to announce the arrival of King Henry, and Fluellen says that he must tell the king about the bridge being secured. King Henry, Gloucester, and soldiers, who look a little worse for wear than when we last saw them, enter, and King Henry asks Fluellen for a report from the bridge. Fluellen delivers the news of success. Then, King Henry asks if England has lost any men. Fluellen reports that the French troops suffered many losses, but the Duke of Exeter's company hasn't lost any men except for Bardolph, who is about to be executed for robbing a church.
Anyone who had seen Shakespeare's Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2 would expect King Henry V to recognize Bardolph by name or by Fluellen's detailed description of Bardolph's adult acne, as in those plays, Henry, then known as Prince Hal, spent time in Bardolph's company. However, as King Henry V, Henry declares that he would have all similar offenders punished with death and commands that no English soldier should steal from the French villages or even use foul language towards the French.
A trumpet sounds, and Montjoy enters with a message from the French king that France has just been waiting for the right moment to actually fight England, and King Henry will come to regret his campaign in France once France wins, and England has to pay reparations for the loss of life and property they have caused, in addition to submitting to France's superiority. Furthermore, King Henry's decision to invade France has led his followers to destruction, and the King of France condemns that decision.
Montjoy concludes his speech, and King Henry asks his name and compliments Montjoy on a job well done. King Henry tells Montjoy to return to the King of France and inform the king that Henry does not seek to battle with the French forces at this time. Henry would be willing to march his forces to Calais without further hindrance, as the English troops are sick and tired and they have lost some men. Henry pays Montjoy and tells him to tell the French king that if the king lets them pass to Calais, then the English will not seek out battles. However, if the King of France decides to try and stop the English troops from getting to Calais, the English will fiercely fight back and beat the French armies. Montjoy exits to deliver this message. Gloucester comments that he hopes the French will choose to not attack the English troops, and King Henry replies that it is up to God, not the French. King Henry instructs everyone to continue to march towards the bridge as it is getting late. They will camp on the other side of the river, then continue marching tomorrow. All exit.
Back in the French court, several noblemen enter, including the Constable of France, Lord Rambier, the Duke of Orleans, and the Dauphin. They are excitedly preparing for battle. The Constable, the Duke of Orleans, and the Dauphin brag about their armor and horses, going so far as to call their horses their mistresses. Lord Rambier bets he can capture 20 prisoners. At midnight, the Dauphin exits to go put his armor on, and the Constable, Duke of Orleans, and Lord Rambier comment on how eager the Dauphin is to go to battle, even though he has never done harm to anyone before now.
The French noblemen continue to joke with each other. Then a messenger enters to inform the constable that the English army is now encamped within 1,500 paces of the French camp. The messenger exits, and the French noblemen continue to discuss how eager they are for battle in the morning. They talk about how the English should just run away, as the English troops are now hungry and won't have any stomach for battle tomorrow. Impatiently, the constable asks if it is time to put on their armor yet. The Duke of Orleans replies that it is now 2 o'clock in the morning. The battle will start between 9 and 10 in the morning. Orleans bets that by 10 a.m., the French will have won the battle. All exit.
The chorus re-enters and asks the audience to imagine that it is now 3 in the morning, and that they hear the sounds of an army camp the night before a battle. Campfires, horses, armorers putting the finishing touches on battle armor. The chorus reminds the audience that the French are well rested, overconfident that they will easily beat the English forces, and impatient for morning to arrive. Meanwhile, the sick, injured, and hungry English troops look like ghosts as they sit by their fires patiently and quietly thinking about the danger that awaits them in the morning. Meanwhile, the chorus reveals, King Henry is going from tent to tent to wish every single member of his army good luck in the morning. Because King Henry doesn't show any signs of worry for the battle tomorrow, every troop he meets is encouraged by and takes comfort from his visit. And now, the chorus says, the play will move to the battle, but please excuse the theatrical representation of the Battle of Agincourt, as the theater cannot create a full and accurate depiction of the battle. The chorus exits.
King Henry and Gloucester enter, in mid-conversation, to meet with Bedford. The king agrees with something Gloucester has said offstage, that the army is facing great danger. King Henry then notes that, on the bright side, France meeting them for battle has led to everyone waking up early, and waking up early is good for your health. They have plenty of time to get ready to face their doom and turn this lemon of war into a lemonade of victory.
Sir Thomas Erpingham enters, and King Henry greets him by wishing that Erpingham was resting his white head on a comfy pillow instead of the turf of France. Erpingham is an experienced captain in the army, however, and says that he prefers his current lodging. It's the same as the king's. King Henry replies that Erpingham's cheery demeanor is a good example for other soldiers, and he asks to borrow Erpingham's cloak. King Henry excuses his brothers, Gloucester and Bedford, and Erpingham. Henry instructs them to finish the good luck wishing he has been doing with the remaining princes, and then tell the other princes to meet him at his pavilion. Henry needs to think alone for a bit. Everyone but the king exits.
Pistol enters and asks King Henry who he is. Pistol clearly does not recognize the king, speaking to him informally throughout the scene. Henry lies and says that he is a gentleman volunteer serving in the army. Henry addresses Pistol more formally and respectfully. Pistol asks if King Henry carries the pike, and Henry says he does, then asks who Pistol is. Pistol replies that he is as good a gentleman as an emperor, and Henry says that Pistol must be better than the king then. Pistol replies that the king is a good fellow, a lively lad, of good parentage, that Pistol would kiss the king's dirty shoe, and that he loves the king.
Pistol then asks Henry what Henry's name is, and Henry replies that his name is Harry Leroy, like French for Henry the King. However, Pistol hears the name Leroy and asks if Henry is Cornish. Henry replies he is Welsh, and Pistol asks if Henry knows Fluellen, to which Henry replies that he does. Pistol says that Henry should tell Fluellen that the next time Pistol sees Fluellen, he will use the leek Fluellen keeps in his hat to beat Fluellen about the head. Henry warns Pistol to not wear his dagger in his hat that day, lest Fluellen cudgel Pistol with the hilt of the dagger. Pistol asks if Henry is Fluellen's friend, and Henry says yes, and his kinsman. Then, Pistol flips Henry off and starts to exit. Henry thanks Pistol as Pistol leaves, and Pistol calls back that his name is Pistol. Henry notes that the name fits the fierceness of the person.
Just then, Fluellen and Gower enter separately and meet without noticing Henry. Gower calls Fluellen, and Fluellen tells him to say less, because to chit-chat the night before battle is unbecoming, in Fluellen's mind. Fluellen says that if Gower were to study the ancient Roman wars, Gower would see that it is good soldiership, and military strategy is to be quiet. Gower points out that the French camp has been loud all night, and Fluellen sarcastically asks Gower if the enemy is making a fool of themselves. Does that make it okay for the English to make fools of themselves? Gower replies that he will speak more quietly, and Fluellen asks him to please do so, as they exit. King Henry observes that even though Fluellen's ideas about wartime are a little outdated, Fluellen is full of valor and clearly cares a lot.
Then, 3 common English soldiers enter. Their names are John Bates, Alexander Court, and Michael Williams. Court asks Bates if the sun is indeed rising, and Bates replies that he thinks it is but is not eager to see it. Williams agrees that they may see the day begin, but he does not think they will see the day's end. Williams then spies Henry and asks who he is and who he serves under. Henry replies that he is a friend who serves under Sir Thomas Erpingham. Williams asks what Erpingham thinks of the condition of the English army, and Henry replies that Erpingham thinks that they are like shipwrecked men who are waiting to be pulled back to sea with the next tide. Or, to put it less poetically, Erpingham thinks it is hopeless.
Bates asks if Erpingham has said this to the king, and Henry replies that no, Erpingham hasn't and shouldn't. Henry says that he thinks the king is a man just like they are, and no doubt has fears like these men do. However, the king can't show fear because then it would dishearten the rest of the army, and therefore it wouldn't be helpful for Erpingham to express his fears to the king. Bates says that the king can be as outwardly courageous as he wants, but Bates will still wish to be anywhere but here. Henry responds that he thinks the king would not want to be anywhere else, to which Bates responds that he wishes then that the king were here alone. Then the king could be ransomed and captured, and many men's lives would be saved.
Henry calls Bates's bluff and says that he thinks Bates actually doesn't dislike the king so much as to wish the king was here alone, but is just saying this to get a sense of what the rest of the men think. Henry says that there is no place he'd rather die than fighting for the king, especially for such a just and noble cause. Bates and Williams reply that they don't know enough about the cause to know whether it is just or noble. They are just the king's subjects. If the cause is wrong, they aren't criminally liable for following his orders. However, the king will have to answer, spiritually, for all of the innocent dead who lose their lives and limbs fighting an unjust war and are unable to atone for their sins before death and are damned to hell.
Henry argues that it is not the king's fault if men die unchristian deaths in battle, and the king will not have to answer for their souls. Furthermore, even with a perfectly just cause, no king will leave war without losing some soldiers. Additionally, some soldiers join the war with premeditations of murder, rape, pillage, and robbery, and these men, even if they escape punishment by law at home, will have to face the judgment of God, and God uses war to punish the wicked. Additionally, prisoners who were facing the death penalty are fighting in the army, and if they die in battle, then they were able to live a little longer than they would have at home, and the king is no more guilty of their damnation than he was for their crimes. Henry continues that subjects owe the king their duty, but each subject's soul is their own, and if they fear damnation, they should take care of absolving themselves before battle. If they don't die, the time spent absolving themselves was a good loss of time, and maybe God let them live because they did prepare so well, and should now go teach others to do similar.
Williams and Bates agree that the king is not responsible for the souls of his troops and that every man is responsible for his own soul. Bates reaffirms that he is ready to fight for the king. Henry replies that he heard the king say that the king would not allow himself to be ransomed. Williams says that this was just to keep the spirits of the troops up, but if they are all killed, the king could still be ransomed and none of the troops would know. Henry says if he lives to see that happen, he will never trust the king again. Williams tells Henry that Henry should pay the king's ransom then for saying such a foolish thing, and admonishes Henry for saying so, because why would a commoner not trusting the king's word matter?
Henry replies that Williams is being a little harsh with his reproof, and if it were a better time, he would fight Williams for honor's sake. Williams agrees to quarrel at a later date if they both come out of the battle alive, and they exchange gloves as a token of this promise. They will each wear the other's glove in their hat, and if they see each other again and claim their own glove back, that will serve as the initiating challenge to a quarrel. Williams and Henry engage more promises to fight each other in the future, until Bates tells them to knock it off, as there are plenty of French quarrels to be had today. Henry agrees and says that the French can say the odds are 20-1 that the French will win, but he believes England will win. The soldiers exit.
Alone on stage, Henry remarks on how the king can be at fault for everything wrong in the lives of commoners. He was born to be great, and that means he has to hear every man's complaints, even though they only think about themselves. Common men have so little to worry about compared to the king, and ceremony is the only thing the king has that common men do not. Henry questions the worth of that ceremony and asks if it is nothing else than the creation of eminence of position that creates awe and fear in other men. Henry goes on to say that the ceremony of royalty is nothing but false flattery and doesn't mean that subjects owe the king anything. A king can make a beggar bow to him, but the king does not have a claim to the health of the beggar's knees. None of the trappings of a king can allow the king to sleep as easily at night as poor commoners who do physical labor all day. Instead, the king is up at all hours of the night to keep watch and keep the commoners safe.
Just as Henry has finished expressing his jealousy of the common folk, Erpingham enters to tell Henry that the other nobles are getting anxious about Henry's absence and have started to search the camp for him. Henry instructs Erpingham to gather the nobles at Henry's tent, and Henry will be there soon. Erpingham exits to do that.
Alone again on stage, Henry kneels to pray. He prays to the god of battles and asks for his soldiers to not be afraid. He asks for the god of battles to take away the soldiers' abilities to count, so they do not realize the English forces are outnumbered. Henry asks God to not take this moment to seek retribution for how Henry's father became king. For reference, Henry's father deposed Richard II and became Henry IV. But back to Henry V. Henry reminds God that he has newly interred Richard II's body in Westminster Abbey, so that Richard is now buried next to his first wife, Anne, and Henry has cried more tears over Richard II's body than Richard lost blood. Henry continues to remind God that Henry is paying 500 priests annually to pray for repentance for Richard's death, and has also built 2 chapels specifically to house priests who can sing repentances for Richard's soul. Henry promises to do more to repent for Richard's death, even though he feels he can never do enough, and implores God to pardon him.
In that moment, Gloucester calls for Henry from off stage, and Henry stands up, recognizing his brother's voice. Gloucester enters, and Henry acknowledges that he knows that Gloucester has been sent to find the king. Henry agrees to go with Gloucester and meet his friends and the day, as everything and everyone are waiting for the king. Henry and Gloucester exit.
The scene switches back to the French camp, and the Dauphin, Orléans, and Rambure enter. The sun has risen, and all 3 chat excitedly about getting up and ready for battle. The constable enters, also in good spirits, and remarks that the French horses are also eager for the day and battle to start. A messenger enters and delivers the news that the English army has assembled in battle formation, then exits.
The constable orders the French princes to their horses and comments that the fair appearance of the French princes and their army will be enough to suck the life out of the English troops, who are sickly and frail. The constable continues to describe the state of the English army in comparison to the French. The English are outnumbered. The French could just breathe on the English and the English will fall. The numbers of French peasants in the French army are more than enough to overwhelm and defeat the English. The French won't need to do much in battle to win. And finally, just the approach of the French armies will be enough to make King Henry cower in fear.
Grandpré enters and asks what is keeping the French noblemen from the battlefield. He then also vividly describes the English troops as being ragged, starving, almost dead already, and says the English troops are now just waiting for their death, and so are the crows that are circling above them. The constable remarks that the English troops have said their prayers and are ready to die. The Dauphin jokingly asks if the French should send over some new armor and food for the English troops and their horses before going to battle. The constable says that he was just waiting for his flag bearer, and then urges all of the French noblemen to go to the battlefield. They all exit.
Back on the English side of the battle, Gloucester, Bedford, Exeter, and Erpingham, and all of his troops, enter along with 2 new noblemen, the Earls of Salisbury and Westmoreland. Gloucester asks where King Henry is, and Bedford and Westmoreland reply that Henry had ridden his horse out to the front of the battle to get a look at the French side, and that the French have 60,000 men on their side. Exeter replies that the French have 5 times the men that the English do, and, as we know, the French are well rested. Salisbury acknowledges the rough odds, wishes for God to be on the English side, and bids farewell to the group. Salisbury exits to go lead his troops.
King Henry enters, as Westmoreland wishes aloud that they had another 10,000 men in the English army. Henry remarks that no, they don't need any more men on their side today. If they are meant to die, then that means fewer Englishmen will die today. If they win, then they will have greater glory. Henry doubles and triples and quadruples down on asserting that he does not desire even one man more on their side. Henry then tells Westmoreland to proclaim throughout the entire army that any man who does not have the stomach to fight today can depart. He will be given a letter of authority from the king to travel freely throughout the country and money to fund his journey. Henry says that he would not die alongside someone who wasn't willing to die side by side with him.
Henry continues, noting that today is the day of the feast of St. Crispian. He elaborates that any man who is living at the end of today and returns safely home will forever remember the day of St. Crispian as the day where that man fought this battle. Those men that return safely home and grow old will show off their scars they earned in battle on this day. Then these men will raise a glass to toast the names of King Henry and the assembled noblemen who led them in this battle. Henry continues, saying that these men will teach their sons the story of what happened today, and in the future, no St. Crispian's Day will go by without remembering what these few Englishmen did in battle. Henry proclaims that all who fight today shall be considered his brothers, no matter how low the status of their birth, and furthermore, those Englishmen who are at home back in England will, in the future, think themselves less of a man whenever they hear someone speak who fought alongside King Henry on St. Crispin's Day.
Salisbury enters and urges the king to get ready quickly, as the French have fully assembled in battle formation. Henry replies that everything is ready as long as their minds are ready too. Westmoreland replies that anyone who is thinking of retreating now should die, and Henry asks if Westmoreland still desires more troops from England. Westmoreland replies that he would go to battle even if it was just him and Henry against the entire French army. Henry replies that he appreciates Westmoreland wishing for fewer men rather than wishing for even one more. Henry reminds the assembled nobles that they know their roles and places for the battle and wishes them well.
Montjoy, the French herald, enters and asks King Henry if Henry will surrender before facing certain defeat by the French. Montjoy also notes that the Constable of France requests that, in surrendering, Henry should also remind his troops to repent and peacefully retreat from these fields where they are otherwise sure to die. Henry asks Montjoy who, specifically, has sent this message, and Montjoy replies that he is delivering a message from the Constable of France.
Henry tells Montjoy to tell the Constable that France will need to actually beat him before they can claim his death. Henry goes on to say that France is making a mockery of his troops by being so presumptuous to assume that France will win the battle. Henry believes that many of his troops will not die today, but will die sometime later at home in England. Those that do die in battle will be honored in death in England, and their decaying bodies will unleash a plague in France. So, in the end, they will still kill many French.
Henry then instructs Montjoy to tell the constable that, yeah, the English are just ordinary soldiers and, sure, their armor is dirty and worn instead of shiny and new, but they are ready to fight. Henry's soldiers tell him that they'll steal new clothes off of the French troops they kill in battle, and he says that if they do this, the English will have plenty of spoils of war. Henry tells Montjoy to not come again to try and negotiate. The French will not be able to get anything from Henry except his body if they kill him in battle. Montjoy promises that Henry will not hear from him again and exits. Henry remarks that he thinks he will see Montjoy at least once more. Then the Duke of York enters and asks King Henry for permission to lead the vanguard. King Henry grants the Duke of York permission and orders the English troops to march into battle. All exit.
A trumpet sounds and battle ensues. In the midst of the battle, Pistol, a French soldier, and the boy enter. Pistol orders the French soldier to yield, and the French soldier says that he thinks that Pistol is a gentleman of quality. However, Pistol does not speak French and misunderstands the soldier. This misunderstanding goes both ways and leads to some wordplay comedy. Eventually, Pistol asks the boy to translate, and the boy does. Pistol asks the soldier his name and tells the soldier to prepare to die. The soldier begs Pistol to spare his life because he is a gentleman and can pay Pistol 200 crowns, and Pistol accepts. The soldier is incredibly thankful, and Pistol exits with the soldier. The boy comments how Pistol is a cowardly loudmouth, and Bardolph and Nym had more courage, but have both been hanged for stealing. The boy remarks that he has to stay with the other footmen and keep watch over the camp and the luggage of the soldiers who are fighting. He goes on to say that the French would find it easy to steal the luggage if they knew only boys were keeping watch at camp. He exits.
Elsewhere on the battlefield, the French constable, Dauphin, Orléans, Bourbon, and Rambure enter, exclaiming with surprise that they have lost the day. There is a short alarm of retreat, and the Dauphin orders the group to not run away, while the constable comments that the French troops have broken ranks. They remark in disbelief that they have been beaten by the English, who appear to be so weak and in such poor condition. Bourbon cries shame upon the group and urges them to once again go back into battle or be forever shamed. The men agree, and Orléans notes that they still have enough Frenchmen in the battle to overwhelm the English troops. They decide to go back into fighting because death is better than shame, and exit.
In another location on the battlefield, a trumpet sounds to announce the entrance of King Henry with his troops and prisoners. King Henry remarks that England has done well today, but there is still more work to do. The French are still in possession of the field, even though England won the battle for the day. The soldiers and prisoners exit as Exeter enters. Exeter delivers news to King Henry that the Duke of York and Earl of Suffolk have died in the day's action, but before dying, the Duke of York asked Exeter to tell the king of York's service and good wishes on behalf of the king. Exeter says that watching the Duke of York lay down and die next to the body of Suffolk made Exeter cry, and King Henry admits that the retelling of it is making his kingly eyes water too. A trumpet sounds, and King Henry realizes that the alarm is coming from the English camp. The French have regrouped and reinforced their troops by plundering the luggage of the English and killing the boys who kept watch. Henry orders all English soldiers to kill their French prisoners. All exit.
At the side of the English camp, Fluellen and Gower enter as Fluellen is exclaiming over how it is against the laws of war for the French to have killed the boys and plundered the English luggage. This confirms what Henry understood from the alarm. Gower also confirms that not a single boy was left alive. Everything in the camp was burned and stolen, and that King Henry's retaliation of killing all French prisoners is justified. Gower and Fluellen then compare King Henry to Alexander the Great, and there is more humor created because of Fluellen's Welsh accent.
As they are agreeing that Henry is very much like Alexander, another trumpet sounds and announces the entrance of King Henry with Bourbon as his prisoner, along with Warwick, Gloucester, Exeter, a herald, other English troops, and other French prisoners. Henry declares that the actions of the French in the English camp have made him angry for the first time since he entered France. He orders the herald to go to the French, who are assembling on a hill, and tell them to either come down and fight or run. If the French stay on the hill, the English will come to them and make them run away. Henry continues that he will have his troops kill every prisoner they take and show no mercy.
As Henry tells the herald to go, Montjoy enters, looking more humble than before. Henry asks what Montjoy can possibly want, and Montjoy responds that the French are asking for Henry to grant the French permission to safely collect their war dead from the battlefield in order to give them proper burial. Henry responds that he does not know if the English have won or not because he still sees lots of living Frenchmen. Montjoy responds that victory is England's. Henry gives thanks to God and asks Montjoy for the name of the nearby castle. Montjoy replies that it is called Agincourt, and Henry declares that this day will be called the Battle of Agincourt, fought on St. Crispian's Day.
Fluellen remarks that Henry's great-grandfather, Edward III, and Henry's great-uncle, Edward the Black Prince, also fought famous battles in France, and Henry says, yes, they did. Fluellen goes on to note that Welshmen did good service in these older battles in a garden where leeks grow, and wore leeks in their caps as a badge of honor. Finally, an explanation for the leek Fluellen wears in his hat. Fluellen says that he believes that King Henry proudly wears a leek on St. David's Day, the day of the patron saint of Wales. King Henry says he does, for he is also Welsh, like Fluellen.
Fluellen and King Henry celebrate their mutual Welshness, and King Henry instructs the English herald to go with Montjoy and bring back the numbers of dead on both sides. During this, Williams enters. Remember, Williams was the common soldier who challenged the disguised Henry to a future duel if they both survived the battle. Montjoy, Gower, and the English herald exit, and King Henry orders Williams brought to him. Exeter delivers the order to Williams, and King Henry asks Williams why Williams is wearing a glove in his cap. Remember, King Henry would recognize the glove as his own and knows exactly why Williams is wearing it.
Williams replies that it is a pledge to duel with another man if that man is still alive. Henry asks if the man is in the English army, and Williams replies yes, and that this particular Englishman is a swaggering rascal who Williams has sworn to challenge if the man comes for the glove Williams has, or if Williams sees the man who should be wearing Williams's glove. King Henry asks Llewellyn if it is appropriate for Williams to keep his oath, and Llewellyn replies that Williams would be a villain to not keep the promise of the duel. Henry remarks that Williams's enemy could be a gentleman who isn't actually obligated to answer a duel from someone of William's rank. Hilarious dramatic irony here, as the audience and King Henry know that King Henry is the holder of Williams's glove.
Llewellyn responds that, no matter what the other man's rank, it is necessary for Williams to keep his oath, or else Williams's reputation would be ruined. King Henry tells Williams that Williams can keep the vow. Williams replies that he will, and King Henry asks who Williams serves under. Williams replies that he serves under Gower, and King Henry tells Williams to go tell Gower to come to King Henry. Williams exits.
Now that Williams is off stage, King Henry turns to Llewellyn, gives Llewellyn the glove that King Henry took from Williams last night, and tells Llewellyn to wear it as a favor in his cap. King Henry tells Llewellyn that the glove belongs to a Frenchman, Alençon, and if Llewellyn is challenged by any man for the glove, that man is a friend to Alençon and an enemy of the king. Henry instructs Llewellyn to apprehend any man who challenges him for the glove. Llewellyn happily accepts the glove, not making the connection between Williams's glove and this glove. King Henry asks if Llewellyn knows Gower, and when Llewellyn says he does, Henry asks Llewellyn to go get Gower and bring him to the king's tent. Llewellyn exits to do that.
King Henry then turns to the assembled noblemen and explains what exactly he has just done. Given Williams permission to duel the man who has Williams's glove in his hat, and given Williams's glove to Llewellyn, even though technically King Henry should be the one who wears it. Henry tells Warwick and Gloucester to follow Llewellyn closely because if William strikes Llewellyn, a fight may break out because Llewellyn is pretty quick to quarrel. King Henry instructs Warwick and Gloucester to make sure no actual harm comes between Llewellyn and Williams. Henry just wants to have a little fun with the misunderstanding. They all exit, with Henry and Exeter going separately from Warwick and Gloucester.
Elsewhere, though presumably not far from the previous location, Williams has located Gower, and they are walking together back towards the king. William says that he supposes the king wants to knight Gower, when Llewellyn enters to also bring Gower to the king. Williams asks Llewellyn if Llewellyn recognizes the glove in Williams's cap, and Llewellyn replies that he knows it is a glove. Williams says that he recognizes the one in Llewellyn's cap, and in keeping with his oath of challenge, Williams boxes Llewellyn's ear.
Llewellyn accuses Williams of being a traitor, and William denies being a traitor. Soldiers enter, and Llewellyn orders them to apprehend Williams in the name of the king, as Williams is a friend of Alençon. Warwick and Gloucester enter and ask what is the matter. Llewellyn replies that he has discovered a traitor in their midst. King Henry and Exeter enter, and King Henry asks what is the matter. Although, come on, Henry knows exactly what is up.
Llewellyn and Williams both argue their sides of the story, or, in Llewellyn's case, what he believes to be true based on what King Henry told him. King Henry eventually asks Williams for the glove in William's cap and reveals that he, King Henry, is the owner of its match and the one that Williams actually promised to strike. Llewellyn calls for Williams to be hanged, and King Henry asks Williams how Williams will make amends to the king. Williams argues that he never wished the king harm. However, the king appeared to Williams in disguise. Therefore, Williams argues he was only acting based on who he thought Henry was, a commoner, and not knowingly against the king. He asks for pardon and kneels before King Henry.
King Henry raises Williams back up and instructs Exeter to fill up the glove that came from Williams's cap with coins and give it to Williams. Presumably, this payment is enough to make it okay that Williams was caught in the middle of Henry's little game. Henry tells Williams to keep the glove and continue to wear it as a badge of honor in his cap until Henry comes to challenge Williams for it. Henry tells Fluellen to make peace with Williams, and Fluellen does, giving Williams an additional 12 pence and telling Williams to stay out of fights. Williams refuses Fluellen's money, but Fluellen insists that Williams should take it to at least mend his shoes. Williams silently takes the money.
The English herald enters and delivers King Henry a piece of paper with the number of French dead. King Henry asks his uncle Exeter which French nobles were taken as prisoner, and Exeter replies that Orléans, Bourbon, and Lord Boucicaut are among at least 1,500 nobles taken prisoner in addition to commoners. King Henry reveals that the paper says that 10,000 French lie slain in the field, which includes 126 princes and nobles, 8,400 knights, esquires, and gentlemen, and only 1,600 of the slain 10,000 were mercenaries, so the rest are French men of quality. He specifically names the Constable, Lord Rambier, and Grandpré, along with 12 other nobles.
Henry then asks for the number of English dead, and the paper the herald gives confirms the deaths of the Duke of York and Earl of Suffolk, who the audience already heard about, 2 other notable nobles, and only 25 common Englishmen. Henry ascribes these uneven losses to God alone. He then instructs the group that they will go in procession to the nearby village, declares that it is death for any man to brag of this victory or to take praise for it, for their victory belongs to God.
Fluellen asks for clarification, since it is usually lawful in war to speak about how many were killed, and Henry agrees that it is. However, the English must acknowledge that God fought on their side. Henry then instructs the group to give the dead Christian burials. Then they will march to Calais, then return to England as the happiest men to ever return from France. All exit.
The chorus enters to mark the beginning of the final act of this play. The chorus says that, for those that are unfamiliar with the story of King Henry V, he will describe what happens next and asks for those familiar with the story to excuse anything that the play has had to cut for time or lack of actors. The chorus tells the audience that King Henry has gone to Calais and sailed to England. Use your imagination. The audience is instructed to imagine the beaches of Dover packed with men, women, and children who cheer to greet the king, and their cheers drown out the sound of the ocean. The king landed in England and ceremonially marched towards London. At Blackheath, just outside the city of London, the mayor of London met the king and desired to celebrate his return, but the humble king refused to be paraded alongside his helmet and sword, and the damage they sustained in battle.
The chorus tells the audience to imagine all the citizens of London pouring out of their houses and wearing their best clothes to meet the king and celebrate his return, like the audience of Shakespeare's day would if an Elizabethan general returned triumphant home from suppressing rebellion in Ireland. That's Shakespeare throwing in a current for him event. The chorus says that the citizens of Henry's day did much more for Henry.
Okay, so now, the chorus says, imagine Henry is in London. France is in mourning because the Dauphin is dead, and the Holy Roman Emperor is coming to London on France's behalf to arrange the peace treaty between France and England. However, the play is going to skip all of that and more and pick back up at Henry's return to France a few years later. Got it? Okay, now let's go back to France. The chorus exits.
Fluellen and Gower enter in mid-conversation about Fluellen's leek. Gower asks why Fluellen is wearing the leek today because St. David's Day has passed. Fluellen explains that there is a good reason. Pistol came to Fluellen yesterday, on St. David's Day, with bread and salt and told Fluellen to eat his leek. And, since they were not in a place where Fluellen could challenge Pistol to a duel, Fluellen is going to wear the leek in his cap until he runs into Pistol again.
Speak of the devil. Pistol enters. Pistol and Fluellen exchange insults, and Fluellen tells Pistol to eat the leek. When Pistol refuses, Fluellen hits him with a cudgel. Pistol continues to resist eating the leek, and Fluellen repeatedly cudgels him and threatens Pistol until Pistol begrudgingly eats the leek. Fluellen gives Pistol a groat, a coin worth 4 pence, and Pistol takes it as an advance payment for his revenge. Fluellen says that if they meet again, he will cudgel Pistol again, and then Fluellen exits.
Pistol vows revenge, and Gower upbraids him for being a knave who thought Llewellyn wasn't worth respect because he was Welsh. Gower tells Pistol to learn the lesson that the Welshman has attempted to teach: how to be a respectful Englishman. Gower exits. Alone on stage, Pistol laments his fortune. Hostess Quickly, remember, his wife, has died of syphilis, and therefore he no longer has a home back in England. He is growing old, and now he has been physically beaten. He resolves to go back to England and become a thief. He will steal valor and claim that the scars that Llewellyn's beating will give him were earned valiantly fighting in the war against the French. Pistol exits.
At the French court, King Henry, Exeter, Bedford, Warwick, and other English lords, including Westmoreland, Gloucester, Clarence, and Huntingdon, enter from one door, while the French king, Queen Isabel of France, Catherine, Alice, the Duke of Burgundy, and other French nobles enter at another door. King Henry greets the French and wishes peace and health to the entire meeting. The French king and queen echo the greetings of peace and gratitude to be meeting with King Henry in love and brotherhood instead of in a time of war.
Then, Burgundy describes how he has worked to broker this peace treaty and how France as a country has been changed because of the length of the war. He says that the leaders of both countries are now assembled because the peace treaty is the best chance for France to return to its former self. And he asks if either side has any objections to this treaty. They should make them known now. King Henry says that Burgundy's final draft of the treaty needs to include everything that England asked for and that Burgundy wrote down when he met with King Henry. Burgundy replies that he relayed all of England's requests to France, but the French king hasn't told Burgundy his decision about those requests.
Henry replies that then the peace France wants depends on the French king's answer. The French king says that he has only briefly glanced at the list of demands from England. He asks Henry if Henry will allow a few members of the English council to step outside with the French king and go through the list of demands. The French king is sure that if he can spend a little more time looking through the list, he will accept the terms of the peace. Henry agrees to this and instructs Exeter, Clarence, Gloucester, Warwick, and Huntingdon to go with the French king and further negotiate as needed. Henry asks Queen Isabella if she will stay here or go with the negotiators, and she says that she will go to the negotiations, as a woman's voice might be helpful if the men start quibbling over small details. Henry asks for Catherine to be left with him, as her hand in marriage is his primary request in the treaty negotiations. The Queen agrees, and all leave except for King Henry, Catherine, and Alice.
Henry asks Catherine if she will teach him, a soldier, the kinds of fair words that will help him successfully woo her. Catherine replies that she thinks he will mock her because her English isn't good. Henry says that if she will love him, he will not mock how she speaks English. He asks if she likes him, and she says she does not understand what he means by like me. Henry replies by comparing her to an angel, and Catherine turns to Alice to confirm what he said, in French. Henry understands their conversation and reiterates that he said that and is not ashamed. Catherine protests, in French, that all men are liars. Henry asks Alice to translate, and she does, saying that it is a typical thing for Catherine to say.
Henry says that distrusting flattery makes Catherine more like an Englishwoman than a Frenchwoman. He plainly tells her that his skill at wooing is about as good as her understanding of English. And if she understood him better, she might be underwhelmed by how plain-spoken he is. All he can say is, "I love you," and any further wooing, beyond asking her if she loves him back, exhausts his skills at courtship. He asks if she will agree to marry him.
Catherine replies that she understands, but needs time to consider the proposal. Henry replies that his chances will be ruined if she wants him to perform a dance or recite poetry to win her heart. He has no skill in wooing, and his only skills are for fighting. If the skills he does have could be used to win a wife, it would not be bragging to say that he would easily win her over. But he swears he is unable to perform the part of the lovesick youth or be cunning in his wooing. He gives further examples of how he is plain-spoken and unromantic, but keeps his promises. He says if Catherine can love him despite his inability to woo, he will be hers forever, and he will never be able to woo anyone else since he can't woo at all. All he can offer is his good and true heart, and if Catherine can take him for that, then she will take him as a soldier and a king as well.
After talking for a while, he asks Catherine again what she is thinking. Catherine asks if it is possible for her to love the enemy of France. Henry protests that he is not the enemy of France. Instead, he loves it so much that he wants to be king of all of France. And when he conquers France, and Catherine is his wife, then he will not be the enemy of France. Catherine replies that she does not follow Henry's logic, and he tries to explain it to her in French. He struggles and echoes her earlier sentiment, saying that she will laugh at his bad French. She says that his French is better than her English.
Henry asks again if Catherine can love him, and she replies that she cannot tell. Henry says that he knows she does, even though she will later talk about him with Alice and mock him in private. He asks her to mock him mercifully because he loves her so much. He says that if she will marry him, which he suspects she will, he will have earned her hand through fighting a war, and therefore they will have soldiers for sons. He asks her to imagine the incredible soldier the two of them would make together and asks what she thinks. She says she cannot know any of this, and Henry replies that she is correct. They cannot know the future, but they can promise this future to each other. He asks what she thinks of this promise, complimenting her in French.
Catherine replies that Henry seems to know enough French to deceive even the most prudent young French woman with his wooing. Henry curses his French and returns to asserting his love for Catherine in English. He curses his father for making him stubborn because it is making his wooing frightful. He promises Catherine that he will improve with age, and if she marries him, she will make him even better. He asks again for her answer, and she eventually replies that her decision of marriage is determined at the pleasure of her father, the French king. Henry replies that it will please her father, and she says that she will then be happy to marry Henry.
Henry goes to kiss her hand, but Catherine protests in French because it would be below him to kiss her hand. He then goes to kiss her on the lips, but she protests in French again. Alice translates that it is not the French custom to kiss before marriage. Henry replies that customs are not important to great rulers, and that the two of them do not need to follow the boundaries of one country. As rulers, they set the rules of manners, and they have more liberties than others in how they behave. The social rules that apply to others don't apply to kings and queens. Therefore, he kisses her. He comments that her lips are more persuasive to him than the entire French council or a general petition from all other monarchs.
At that moment, he spies the French king re-entering with all of the French and English lords. Burgundy greets Henry and asks if Henry has been teaching Catherine English. Henry says that he wants Catherine to know how much he loves her, and Burgundy asks if Catherine has been a quick learner. Henry admits that he is not the best at wooing. Burgundy jokes with Henry about the nature of Henry's wooing and says that he will give Catherine a nudge to consent to Henry. Henry remarks that love has made him blind to wanting French cities because he now only cares about Catherine.
Henry then asks the French king if the French king will give Henry Catherine's hand in marriage, and the French king agrees. Henry will wait to conquer France because he now has Catherine. The French king says he has agreed to all reasonable terms of the peace treaty, and Westmoreland confirms that the French king agreed to everything that England asked for. Exeter replies that the French king has only one thing that he has not yet agreed to. Henry's demand that whenever the King of France has to write a deed to confer lands or titles, he needs to name Henry as the French king's son and heir.
The French king remarks that he has not denied this request, but the previous request, to marry Catherine, will make the king agree to this request as well. Henry asks for the French king to let that one article be agreed to along with the rest and Catherine's hand in marriage. The French king gives Catherine to Henry and, with her, future heirs of France, which will ensure long-lasting peace between England and France. All of the lords say amen, and Henry kisses Catherine in front of everyone as his queen.
There is a flourish of trumpets, and Queen Isabella delivers a prayer for Henry and Catherine's marriage, and everyone says amen. Then, Henry says that they will go and prepare for their wedding day. On that day, Henry, France, and all of their liege lords will sign the peace treaty. After that, Henry and Catherine will exchange their vows, and all of these oaths will be well kept and prosperous for all involved. A trumpet sounds, and everyone on stage exits.
The chorus enters for a final time to deliver the epilogue. He notes that this is the best their humble playwright could do for the story of King Henry V within the limits of what is possible on stage. The chorus explains that King Henry V didn't live long and left his kingdom to his son, King Henry VI, when his son was just 9 months old. King Henry VI's government had so many people trying to control it that they lost France and brought destruction to England, the dramatization of which, in Shakespeare's King Henry VI Part 1, 2, and 3, has often been played by this theater company. So, the chorus pleads with the audience to consider how much they like Shakespeare's Henry VI plays when deciding to let this play find favor in their hearts.
And that's King Henry V. Thank you for listening.
Thank you to our guest editor, Nat Yance. I'm Kourtney Smith.
And I'm Elyse Sharp.
This is Shakespeare Anyone?
Thank you so much for listening to Shakespeare Anyone. Works referenced in this episode are available in the episode description. Our theme music is Neverending Minute by Sounds Like Sander.
If you would like to support us, visit shakespeareanyone.com/support or check out the links in our episode description. You can also hit the subscribe button, like us, leave a comment, write a review, share us on social media, tell a friend about us, all the things. We'd appreciate it. For more, you can visit our website, shakespeareanyone.com, or follow us on Instagram at ShakespeareAnyonePod.
Now, because you listened all the way to the end of the credits, here is a completely random Shakespeare quote for you.
From Venus and Adonis, lines 437 to 438. Though neither eyes nor ears to hear nor see, yet should I be in love by touching thee.